Gabby, Vice President of the Political Science Club. And today we have the first debate of the year, the gun rights debate. We have college Democrats, college Republicans, and Students for Liberty. So they're each going to answer some questions we've previously written, and then after that's done, we're going to give you some audience questions. The university has asked us to keep a level of civility and keep the volume down a bit because there's classes around us. So if you guys think we're going to do that, that'd be great. So we'll start off first with I guess specific introductions, and then we'll get the ball rolling. So if you guys want to start over there.
Sure. Just as a quick plug, for the College Democrats, we meet every Monday night at 7:30 in Ruby Jones Hall. I'm Victoria, and this is Courtney. But for the most part, we're doing opening statement right now?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, that's it then.
Alright, hello. We are a part of the College Republicans. We meet Mondays at 7 at Insights. Yep. I'm Brie, and this is Alicia.
Hi guys, I'm Jeff Crisola. I'm a senior here at Westchester. This is Alex. We're members of Students for Liberty. We meet every Wednesday, about an hour and a half earlier than this, at 6 o'clock in Sykes at 252. We're Students for Liberty, and we're just for the promotion of liberty.
If we could start with introductions, we'll start with college Democrats.
First question.
For our opening statement?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess this ties into the first question of the debate, actually, so I don't want to go too far into depth. For the most part, our reform on gun rights has to do with the common sense reform initiatives proposed by the Democratic Party. And just as a simple explanation of it, it really just means enforcing background checks and making sure they're up to date, as well as limiting stuff such as clip sizes as opposed to weapons, the gun itself. That way we're really making sure that our people are safe and mass murders aren't happening. And for the most part, that's where we're standing. Would you like to add anything?
Alright. We'd like to open with a thought-provoking analogy. Using a gun for self-defense is like the same logic as wearing your seatbelt when driving a car. You don't wear your seatbelt expecting to get into a car accident. However, in the event that you do, you're prepared. Just because you own a gun doesn't mean you're looking for every excuse to get into trouble. However, similar to wearing your seatbelt, in the event that you do get into trouble, you're prepared and you're able to protect yourself, your family, and those around you.
Jeff and I, as representatives of Students for Liberty, advocate for the continued advancement of liberty in all cases. Since we don't have a set political affiliation, it's important for us to state that we are simply a collection of students held together by the same philosophical ideal, the promotion of liberty. So why is liberty so important to us? Liberty is the realization that natural rights exist. At the heart of natural rights is the idea of self-ownership. You not only have the right to your own body, but to defend it as well. It's hard to find anywhere in the world a better semblance of these natural rights than in the United States Bill of Rights. For the purpose of this discussion, we will focus specifically on the Second Amendment.
And the Second Amendment states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So our focus on liberty directly opposes to any type of government restriction on guns. This is because of the inherent contradiction between liberty and governmental force. To narrow the subject further, specifically to gun control, we would like to point out the hidden meaning or hidden agenda behind the term gun control. So in reality, this phrase is purely the idea that we're going to centralize guns to a small group of people, whether they're permit holders, police, military, or even government officials. We find this to be a very dangerous path to take, as it not only violates the Constitution of the United States, but also directly contradicts the principles of liberty and self-ownership.
So I guess philosophically, where does your party stand on firearm rights? Start with that.
As previously discussed in our opening statement, the Democratic Party really believes in gun violence prevention, and more so than limiting guns, really regulating the safety of the use of guns. And for the most part, it's just, again, limiting clip sizes, making sure background checks are enforced, and limiting the use of military-grade assault weapons.
Alright, our philosophy, Republican Party, is derived from the Founding Fathers' belief in the right to bear arms to protect life, liberty, and property. We uphold the right of individual Americans to own firearms, a right confirmed by the Second Amendment of the Constitution. We believe minimal safety regulations should be in place. We recognize that gun and ammunition control only affects and penalizes the law-abiding citizens, and that such proposals are ineffective at reducing violent crime. Studies in Europe indicate less guns or stricter gun laws does not mean less crimes. For example, in Russia, the gun ownership, for every 1,000 inhabitants, 4,000 owned guns. For that same 1,000, there was a murder rate of 20 people. Finland, the gun ownership of 1,000, I'm sorry, if I've been saying 1,000, I mean 100,000, was 39,000. The murder rate for every 100,000 was only one person.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Philosophically, where does your party stand on firearms rights?
Sure. So as we mentioned in our introduction, Students for Liberty isn't a political party. We have varying interests in our party. Some of us are libertarians, some of us are anarchists, some of us even are Republicans or even Democrats. So to ask where our party stands is a little bit ridiculous. I mean, as we mentioned in our introduction, we are just a group of people that acknowledges that giving individuals freedom to make their own decisions without the threat of violence or force is the best way to handle things. Yeah, I think
You summed it up.
Okay. How would you legislate handguns, hunting weapons, and automatic weapons, and would each category be different? Start with Students for Liberty this time.
Sure. I think our response philosophically is pretty easy. It's not liked by many people, but I mean, we're pretty logically consistent that we don't think there should be any regulation on guns. We don't think that there should be any background checks, any types of restrictions. We think that it is an inalienable right to self-protection, to self-ownership, and to say that a group of people are going to say, these guns are bad, but these guns are okay, but we're still going to allow a certain group of people like permit holders or police to have these guns. I mean, you can just turn on the TV and you can look at any type of situation where police force have these high-grade military weapons, especially in Ferguson, which has been happening for the past couple of months, where citizens have basically nothing to protect themselves in certain situations, whereas these police have high-grade military weapons and can do whatever they want. We find that to be a very scary proposition, more scary than just allowing anybody to buy a machine gun or a rocket launcher or anything like that.
Republicans?
We oppose federal licensing of law-abiding gun owners and national gun registration for handguns and semi-automatic rifles. It is a violation of the Second Amendment and an invasion of privacy of honest citizens. However, we feel one must have a registration and Class 3 license to own a fully automatic machine gun because of their power.
So across the board for the Democrat Party, but specifically for us, most of the Democrat Party wants to see background checks in place and limiting firearm purchasing, but for us, we decided we would like to keep the legislation regular across the board, except everything under the military grade. And a big thing for us was limiting clip sizes. We think that limiting clip sizes would honestly prevent mass murders and also prevent
The real thing that we're trying to stress in this is that there is a black market system in place. So even if we do limit the use of guns, we're still going to be seeing a cycle of underground sales. But in order to prevent something that would be a devastating tragedy for our country, we have decided to take the route of limiting ammunition sales as well as limiting that of clip sizes. That's the real point we're trying to stress today, because we do believe that guns are still going to be in circulation no matter what, so we need to take other measures to prevent such tragedies.
Does anybody want to add anything?
Yeah, can we rebuttal to
Yeah,
that? Yeah, so you basically just said, maybe proved our point, kind of, that you say there's going to be a black market, that there is going to be these guns that there's nothing we can do about. So my question to you would just be, if you are restricting people who are lawfully getting these weapons, or lawfully saying, okay, I need my self-protection, and I know that these dangerous criminals might have higher powered weapons than me, or they might have extended clips and I can't get that, who are you really hurting in this situation? Because criminals, like you said, they might pay a higher price in a black market, but they're still going to obtain the weapons. I mean, criminals commit crimes, that's the point. And whether they use a gun, if you restrict all guns, they might use a
Well,
bomb.
we
or
never
they
said
would
we were
use a knife.
restricting guns, so I'm not sure of the question.
But
Well,
you
you said you were restricting.
Military grade, yes.
Well,
And
Well, it's a gun.
magazine
Flip
size.
side.
Magazine size, yes.
But if you go through a black market, they're gonna get the magazine size of whatever they want. It
The
is
thing with those is it's not necessarily, they don't last as long as guns do. So with that being said, it's easier to regulate that kind of sale because it's not necessarily seen by most Americans as being something that's going to detriment society. It's more seen as a safety issue, and it's an incentive that can be passed and is more feasible in our current state.
Well, two questions. In whose eyes is it more safe for? And what are you saying it doesn't last as long?
They're not necessarily seen as being something that's more, they're not as much of a commodity on the black market, especially clip sizes.
Magazines?
Yes.
Well, you need a magazine for a gun, so.
Yes, but what we're saying with that is it's easier and there's a lot more initiatives in place that can stop the production of them as opposed to guns. Can I ask you guys a question actually?
Sure.
So everybody keeps talking about the Second Amendment, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your positions on that?
Well, the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms.
Yes.
So,
But what's more so further in depth in that clause, why are we bearing arms?
for our protection.
Okay, so we're going to be able to stop the United States military with a handgun?
Well, the idea in the Second Amendment is so that people can be armed so that, you know, you can protect yourself from the government. And yes, there is this whole, no, before I understand what you're saying, there is this problem where the military has tanks and stuff. The issue though is 100 million Americans with rifles will do a way better, or at least can prevent tyranny in a much better way than.
My question for you is, how are the guns going to stop any type of tyranny compared to the higher grade assault weapons that the government does have, such as bombs, such as tanks? There's
Like
no
nuclear
comparison.
weapons?
It's
A
a-
lot better than no guns would.
So we're going to shoot a few
yeah.
people just
It's a
to
good,
stop
it's a
a
good
nuclear
question.
bomb.
It's a good question. There's a simple answer to it. I mean, look at any war in the last 50 years that's taken place. I mean, you have Vietnam, or Korea, Vietnam, First Gulf War, the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, and you can even take the Russian invasions of Afghanistan in the late 70s and early 80s. All these situations have to deal with a large superpower, the United States or the UN, getting involved in a situation where they had all the guns, and they're going against small forces that had very limited guns. But what happened in all those wars?
Well, there is a substantial difference between that time period and the time period that we're currently
Well,
in.
even recent-
There's a lot of technology
Well,
that's
even-
changed the
Iraq
course
and
of history.
Afghanistan were pretty recent.
And we have ISIS right now.
Mostly, I
That's
mean,
All
There's
right,
a lot
so
of-
guys, we're gonna move on to a new question. Sorry.
It's fine.
So next question is, what proposals or initiatives does your party support to promote responsible gun ownership? So Democrats, who would like to start?
Much like the last two questions, we're talking about common sense reforms. So more so regulating the safety and the use. If you can regulate something such as an automobile, having insurance, having seatbelts, as the Republicans stated earlier, it's reasonable to make sense that we could be able to regulate something such as the use of guns, because the purchase or the use of gun is to really make it easier to hurt somebody. So we might as well be regulating the safety on that. Not necessarily the use, but regulations. And that's pretty much where we stand with that.
We support gun handling and safety education and encourage training and practice of your weapons. However, we don't believe these are mandatory in owning a gun. We feel that there should be permits for concealed carry, and that private institutions such as a school should have a say in whether or not they want to allow open or concealed carry on their property. We also believe that hunters should have their hunting licenses, which they obtain through a hunter safety course.
Yeah, so we don't believe in any restrictions or any type of background checks. We think that the problems can be solved just through the free market, through individuals not dealing with people who people not selling guns to people who have mental illnesses or issues like that. So I mean, if you're going to say we're going to invest all this infrastructure and money into trying to restrict these guns, spending all this money to confiscate weapons or to limit production and implement all these different regulations, which is very expensive, wouldn't it make more sense to divert those resources into helping the real root of the problem, which is mental illness? When you look at pretty much every issue or every shooting that's happened, mass shooting in the last 50 years, somehow mental illness is at the root of it. So I mean, it seems to be pretty illogical to say, all right, we're going to spend all this money in taking away guns from people that could use them to protect themselves, but we're not going to help mental illness at all. And that is our #1 reason. And then secondly, like I said, the beginning was just free market approach. If you own a business, you're certainly not going to let somebody come in and just have a loaded machine gun come in. You're going to say, check it at the door or get out. So I think that the market can actually establish people voluntarily acting. I don't think we need this government coming in and saying we're going to use violence and force to take away people's guns. We can let people voluntarily just decide, look, people killing each other is a bad thing. I think most people understand that. Everybody in this room, I don't think there's a murderer among us. And I think most people are like that. It's just a very, very small few that get affected in this trap, and implementing sweeping gun control policy is not the answer.
I just have a question for the Republicans. I think I heard you correctly, but did you say that you want it to be legal to carry guns in school? And can you elaborate on that?
Yes, no, we were saying that we believe private institutions such as school should have their own say in whether they want open carry, concealed carry or not. For example, Kutztown University, they have an open carry.
Not Westchester.
Not Westchester, open carry at Kutztown University. So we say it's up to the private institution whether whatever they want to do is up to them, not up to the government.
Kutztown isn't a private institution though.
It's a public school.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying like it shouldn't be up to the federal government. It should be up to that institution itself.
Just out of curiosity, just to clarify, you're talking about secondary education facilities or primary? Elementary school.
Like higher education
Well,
or...
you have to be 21 to carry.
What do you?
Okay. We were just clarifying that you were talking about
So
elementary school.
who's to say that if something like that got passed, that something from that couldn't get passed, saying that teachers in elementary schools can start carrying guns?
Well, I think they should.
What's wrong with that?
I think that they should be trained, and I think that they should.
I understand what you're saying.
Think about it. How many different school shootings do you think would have been put to a stop if maybe
They had cops on duty. At
Yes.
I agree with cops on
or
duty.
teachers, or even the principal
Here's
had a
the other
weapon
thing with
on their
that.
hand.
Accidents happen, and when you're putting a gun in a classroom full of first graders, you're going to be bound.
But
lot
a
of the-
responsible
well, the
gun owner would keep the gun on them and wouldn't
But
have
would you say-
children playing with
Or
the gun.
locked. It's supposed to be in
Okay.
a case with the magazine taken out and
Yes.
locked.
So that's what the teachers are going to have on hand in your proposed agenda.
So how are they supposed to get to the gun in
Before-
a timely manner if there's a shooter in their classroom? If
Probably
their
a
gun
lot
is locked?
faster than the cops getting there.
But the cops are on duty at schools for the most part. Most public safety initiatives are there.
I'd like to add, I have a question. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the system they're proposing, would you assume that every teacher at every school would carry guns, yes or no?
I'm
Probably
assuming
not.
it from what they're saying, yes.
Well, probably not, because teachers
Okay,
are.
so that's different from what they were.
Well, no, they're not. I don't know if they're advocating to force teachers to carry guns. I think they're just advocating to let teachers. And the thing is, if you don't feel comfortable, like let's say there was a school where teachers carried guns and you didn't feel comfortable with that, you could send your child to another school.
However, that's different. Most people don't have the means to send their child to a private school if it's a public school education. For the most part, what I'm thinking that they're meaning is that most public teachers are going to be carrying guns, and there's no other options for most families to go to a private school, even in the free market system. There's not always means.
The only thing that we are saying is that these institutions should have their own say. That is the only thing we're saying. That it shouldn't be up to the government. It should be up to the institution itself.
But the institutions are run by the government because they're public schools.
So then what are you saying about Kutztown versus Westchester?
Kutztown
University?
and Westchester are both public institutions.
Exactly.
So therefore, the Pennsylvania state government does have a say because they're the ones initiating and they're the ones who own these schools.
But they have both different gun laws.
Okay, but that's up to the current system. And also, we were talking about primary education facilities, not secondary.
I'm gonna.
You talk.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I said she's in general.
My question would just be, well, it's not really even a question, more of a statement, but why are we thinking in this lens of, well, the school needs to decide whether they can, teachers can carry guns? What's wrong with letting the individual decide?
Because we can't let a first grader carry around the gun.
Not the first
That's
grader,
not the
the
law.
teacher.
It's only 21.
Well, it's a non sequitur. I mean,
That's a non sequitur.
That's
we're advocating
ridiculous.
responsible gun ownership, and we've stated
Okay.
that, that obviously responsible gun ownership is going to come just through natural process. I mean, most people aren't irresponsible with guns. So to say that if you allow a teacher,
I can
when he's on
understand
school
your-
property, not carry a gun, but as soon as he gets in his car, he can have a gun, that doesn't seem very logical. I mean, it's like he can be trusted, or he or she, the teacher, can be trusted when they're in this uniform or outfit and in this space, but when they're in that, they can't be trusted. But when they're in this space, we can trust them all they want. Now, I know you're not advocating for rounding up all the guns and getting rid of every single type of gun, and that's not what we're talking about. I'm just saying it's very arbitrary for you to say that this individual is capable of carrying a weapon at this time, but they're not
The
capable
real
at that
thing
time.
with this is that it should be not up to the teacher, but who's to say the teacher has more influence over the parents of these students? So if the parents aren't comfortable with this system, and I'm not saying that the parents aren't comfortable with this system, but the parents should be the primary advocates in this, not the teacher themselves. Because the teacher is working for the parents of these students because they're not of the age majority.
So what do you suggest is a safer route for?
I can agree with your public safety initiatives. I think that's a much more effective system. It has the ability to take the resources that we do have and have higher training for the people that are in uniforms. So that way we're not spreading the $1,000 we have among 20 teachers, we're spending it among 2 public safety officials where their primary duty is to protect the schools.
Okay.
And I can definitely agree with secondary education because that is a different scenario.
Good. On that note, we're going to move on to the next question. What background checks or investigations does your party support for purchase of firearms? Would there be waiting periods or any other considerations? Republicans, if you want to start.
All right. We support background checks to verify no criminal history, court-declared mental incompetency, illegal citizenship, or dishonorable discharge from the military. We are not in favor of waiting periods and believe that any American should be able to sell guns as long as they have a license to sell and pass a background check.
We believe, first of all, in closing the gun show loophole. With that being said, the gun show loophole needs to be closed because there is no waiting period. You can purchase it on demand, and the background checks aren't cleared. Along with the College Republicans and the Students for Liberty, we definitely agree that mental health is a necessity in enforcing background checks. We agree that mental health is the root cause of a lot of the issues that we're having with the gun ownership. And furthermore, we just believe that gun background checks should be enforced no matter what because it is a safety regulation, and if somebody is a responsible gun owner, they will be able to pass the gun checks.
So now I'm going to begin to sound like a broken record again. Yeah, Students for Liberty, again, we don't support any background checks. We don't support any type of regulation on these guns. We think it's pretty ridiculous to say that, this group of people can have guns, police or permit holders, but this group of people can't. That is just fundamentally just a backward concept. And then to say that if they do have these guns, we're going to use guys with guns to come and take their guns away. That, to us, just seems to be a very, very, and I think to most of you here sitting, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just the idea of the centralization of power and the centralization of these guns into a select few, regardless of what you arbitrarily choose those few to be. So yeah, we believe in self-ownership and individuals making their own decisions and free decisions, and that will always lead to the best outcome.
Anybody want to add anything?
And to advocate to what Jeff just said, the idea here is that when police, for example, have to go through a lot of background checks and all these things so that they can get their guns, for example, and they essentially have more gun rights than a citizen because they can have certain guns that we can't. And yet you still see police doing awful things with their rights. You see them abusing their power, for example. The idea that we can trust government officials to have guns but not other citizens to have certain things, we see that as ridiculous.
We'd like to take audience questions now. So just raise your hand if you have a question. Back.
I just want to thank all of you for arguing your points well. What I'm unclear on, if all of you could just clarify for me, is it seems like all of you are admitting that despite legislation, there will still be an underground black market in firearms sales. It seems like everybody's agreeing to that. What I'm curious about is none of you made any kind of comment about what sort of enforcement issues that raises, saying that even if this is legislation, it's still going to happen. That sort of seems to be abandoning the enforcement side of legislation.
It's not that enforcement's being abandoned. It's that, I mean, you can look at drugs, for example, meth, heroin, mushrooms, LSD. All these things are illegal, and yet you can get most of them on campus if you try hard enough. And it's right. And we have more regulation here. We have, we're a dry campus. It's not even illegal for 21-year-olds to have alcohol, but yet we're a dry campus, and security will enforce that, but people still get through the cracks. The enforcement issue, it's almost the fact that it's almost impossible to enforce certain things. A big thing with economics is that as long as there is a demand for something, someone will try to supply it in some way. If you make something illegal, a black market for it pops up almost instantly. So marijuana has been illegal for a very long time, and it's very easy for even a 14 or 15-year-old to get marijuana. So the idea that enforcement is the issue, yes, enforcement is an issue, but enforcement is almost impossible with things where there is a demand.
It's more that we're recognizing the fact that it's not going to be a perfect system, but making every effort to ensure that the majority are under these rules, and so that we're curbing as much as possible. We agree with nothing being a perfect system.
There also have been initiatives towards the black market. So I remember reading an article about they're creating like an infrared thing because most people will scratch off serial numbers and then easily sell those guns. But they're developing an infrared serial number on these guns, so it's a little bit easier to enforce. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but there are steps.
So to get at your question directly, that word enforcement that you use, to say how are we going to crack down on, we find it to be a problem. I mean, you're already taking the position that you think it might be a problem, that there might be a black market. We're of the position that isn't a problem. I mean, we would like to see people being able to, instead of having to go to a shady black market dealer, which most of them probably aren't, but anyways, if we could just go to the local CVS or whoever, your local gun store and buy a gun, that's going to be a safer transaction. I mean, you don't have to worry about, it's very easy for you to go get a pack of gum. I mean, I don't want to say it's as readily, when it should be readily accessible to buy a gun, but I don't think it would be. I mean, you don't see, liquor stores and porno shops everywhere, but you see CVS's and gas stations everywhere because necessity is based, the market will supply what they need. But to go back to that word enforcement, you're already implying that we need to get guys with guns to go after other guys with guns. And that right there is something that logically, I don't think makes sense to anybody. And if anybody here could square that up with me, I would love to hear.
Can I actually ask a follow-up question to
Sure.
what you just said? So when's the last time somebody went to CVS to buy a packet of gum to kill somebody?
Buy a pack
Just
of gum.
asking. What's the
Sorry.
purpose of a gun?
What's the purpose of anything? I mean, the purpose is
Protection. Okay, but it shouldn't be as easy to buy ammunition as it is to buy gum.
No, his
Why
point
not?
is,
No, I'm serious.
It's all
Why not?
society.
Why not?
Guys, okay, we're gonna take another question. Moving in the back, had a question before. So.
My question is directed straight at Students for Liberty.
Sure.
I heard you talking about, the laws won't get rid of the black market. Well, the point of those laws is to limit and restrict what all those actions. And, we have laws against murder, we have laws against stealing. We haven't eliminated stealing and murder with those laws, but I can guarantee you most people in here would not want to get rid of those laws. So my question to you is you don't think you're being in any way intellectually dishonest when you say, the laws won't get rid of the black market, even though the point of those laws is to restrict the black market?
Certainly not being intellectually dishonest. I mean, being logically consistent. I mean, you might not like it, but the idea is that I don't believe that it's right to force my will upon you. We believe in, it's called the non-aggression principles, that the idea of using violence or coercion against another human being or their property is always inherently wrong. So for you to say that we're making guns, say we operate a black market and we're making guns and selling them, I mean, we're not committing any crime by making a gun. I mean, you could think it is, but the act of making the gun, buying and selling the gun is not a crime. When you murder somebody, that's the crime, and we have a problem with that because you're affecting somebody's property. But the mere action of manufacturing a gun is not a violation of anybody's property. And since we hold the ideals of self-ownership and making your own decisions, it would be very contradictory to our logic to say that we're going to get these people together who are going to force their will upon somebody else.
Right. Well, I'm not necessarily talking about like the legality of making the gun. I'm talking about just basically like you keep on saying that the black market will be eliminated with laws, and my point is like, well, crime technically won't be eliminated. All you can do is just restrict it with laws. So I'm saying,
Has it worked? That's my question. Has prohibition ever worked? Can we give it an example? Can you give me a historical example of when prohibition has worked? I mean, that seems what you're going at, is this idea that if we restrict something, we restrict alcohol in the 20s, it's going to keep people from drinking. If we restrict drugs,
I'm not talking about an actual. I'm not talking about prohibition.
I think I know what you're saying. You're saying like if stealing, based on our logic, you're saying our logic is, well, you can't ban guns because people get them anyway, and you're saying, well, you shouldn't ban stealing. Like, from the way we're seeing it, you're saying that we might as well just say, you might as well just make stealing illegal because people are going to do it anyway. That's what you see our logic as. The issue is that stealing is an actual exertion of force against another individual. You are harming that person. You are not harming anybody by buying a gun, by owning a gun. You aren't affecting anyone else's life. Murder and theft are direct violations of people's natural rights. My ownership of a gun or your ownership of a gun is not, it doesn't affect anyone's natural rights. If I hold a gun to your head, that's the point where I am affecting your natural rights as a human being.
All right, you had a question back there.
Yeah, if you just wanted to strip away from the black market thing, if you wanted to strip this down to its most, I guess, elemental factor, if guns were completely eliminated, how would the common man defend himself against the other common man, the common criminal? It might not be a problem here, but if you go into a statistically high violent area, how would the common person without a gun defend himself against another person that doesn't have a gun?
Are you directing this question to?
Anybody that wants to take
I mean,
it.
I'm sorry.
Like if nobody has guns, how would a weak person defend himself against a strong person?
That's our point, is that
They would keep moving on to other things, and then people would be like, oh, knives cause murder, not people. We should get rid of knives. And we shouldn't.
I mean, when would it end? That's our point, is that having your gun is a protection. It can be used as protection. It's not the gun that kills people, it's the people that kill each other. I mean, that's really something to guess.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little. Yeah, I would love, I mean, it's going to sound shocking, but I'd love to live in a world without guns. I think it'd be great. I mean, I think everybody in here would love that. The idea that, if we could just, everybody could just turn in their guns, voluntarily just say, look, we're not going to use any violence or any police force, we're going to turn in our guns, we're going to sing Kumbaya, it would be great. You wouldn't have the military, you wouldn't have war, you wouldn't have mass destruction. You basically have utopia. And I have no problem with that. If somebody in here could find a way to do that, I'm on board, I will help you any way I can. But the problem is, that's not going to happen. Because somebody's always going to want to exert force on somebody else. And this idea is that whatever you're trying to restrict, whatever you're trying to eliminate, whether it's guns or knives or anything, in this idea of gun control, in this realm of we're going to restrict or regulate, you're going to have a group of people that have and a group of people that don't have. And those group of people that have are going to take away from the people that don't have. And that's where the violence comes in, and that's where therein lies the problem.
Right. But, well, so just real quick, I don't need to, beat the same drum. But, no, like literally, if there were no guns in existence, if I was strong and you were weak, how would you defend yourself against me?
Yeah, I'd create basic economics, I'd create something that would, a good that would help me defeat you,
Okay.
A knife or
I think we're getting off topic
well,
right now, so we're going to move on to another question. Sir in the orange shirt.
Yeah, I'd like to direct 3 simple points to our Democratic friends here. Oh, God. About points that you recently brought up. First question, the first point you made 2-3 minutes ago was, why do you need guns? The answer is very simple. You never, ever, ever bring a knife to a gunfight. It's that simple. The second point that I'd like to address, with regard to the size of clips, you talked about that early on. If you ever find yourself in a bad situation off of I-95 at 2 o'clock in the morning in North Philly, you're gonna wish you had something that was belt fed in your trunk so that you could protect yourself. I know what I'm talking about. My third point, and I speak of this from an educator's standpoint, I happen to own a child care center. My family does. Under state law, I, as the owner of that facility, am completely responsible for the welfare of all the children in that building. And they run from newborns through kindergarten. The same is true for the people that run this university. From the moment you set foot on campus to the time you set foot off of campus, they are responsible for your personal welfare. Now, if the laws are set that a parent or a teacher is not allowed to bring a weapon onto the facility to protect the children, that's the law. But if the law is changed, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be changed, because teachers having weapons can avoid different situations, and it doesn't always take a gun to be a problem, but a gun can sure be a deterrent to someone that's bringing something else very serious. Like I said, you don't bring the knife to the gunfight, but if the other guy's got the knife and you have the gun, he's going to back off and leave very quickly. And speaking again about the responsibility of the school system to protect the students, again, I know from personal experience that state law requires that I, as the owner-operator, do everything that I can possibly do to protect that child at all times when that child's in my facility. And my power supersedes the power of the parent if I think that the parent is in direct threat to that child. I've seen that, been there, done that. And if you check that, you'll find that sometimes the school has to have that little bit of extra authority in order to be able to protect everyone. And following through with what the Republicans are saying and the group down at the end, there's really nothing wrong with the responsible person being a police officer, a teacher, another fellow student.